So our task today is to look at the rectification of Mill. And I sent you all
Hmm.
the rectification spreadsheet, but I should put it on my screen, I think. If I can. So can you now see the rectification spreadsheet?
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got the green
Yep.
and purple document. This, I think, is the most recent green and purple document that we can refer to when we need to.
Hmm.
And there's obviously one column where we have a lot of disagreements, mostly because I haven't rated it apparently, because there's a lot of zeros in this column,
Oh, okay.
and we'll have to figure out what that gets where that gets us into. But the first one of those is the only one on the first sample. So there's actually considerable amount of disagreement almost all the time. Like
Mm.
here, for
Yeah.
example, I say none. I think Julian is second string here, so Julian
Okay.
says a half and Mel says one. So we're
Okay.
all over the place in a lot of this column. So
Yeah,
I'm
I was
guessing
really
I'm
wondering
guessing
about this column.
I'm guessing this is the phenomenon that we're going to have to sort through as we go, and the
Yep.
rest of them are mistakes or slighter disagreements or whatever.
Mm.
So shall we look at this number here, which is me saying no, Julian saying maybe, and Mel saying no to high intensity level, high concentration, high absorption.
Well, I would like to speak holistically or discuss holistically that whole issue, I think. This is sort
Yeah.
of the tricky part,
Yeah.
I thought, for me. Julian, is that your trickiness? Like, I found that I was putting a one in not figurizing, like, basically all the time, which felt like, is this helpful if that's all the time? Or maybe it is. And then with absorption, I sort of lent the way of like, um, well, if I'm like not figurizing was always present when absorption was there for me,
Mm.
like that's sort of the definition I was doing, but I didn't really like
So
any
that
of it.
comment, I would say, is the heart of why the rectification meeting is important. Because I think we at one time thought that this was something that we
Mm,
ought to rate, but now we're discovering in the act of it that maybe that wasn't the right thing, or it was problematic or tricky or whatever, and we got to figure out what to do
Yeah,
about that.
because in the green meeting, or no, it was maybe the post-green pre-rectification meeting, uh, you were saying that level of absorption didn't so much make sense to you. And even if it was a conversation you were in or just an email, it was more passive. It still felt, because you were saying the difference was that the thing itself was just more interesting, but that the experience of it wasn't maybe so different.
mm,
So I thought of that when I was doing the ratings. I was like, should I
mm.
honor more that interpretation or more the original descriptions where there we did kind of talk about different levels of absorption? So yeah, that's what made it tricky for me.
Yeah, and then I sort of felt like, I don't know, I didn't really trust my answer each time here. Like, I was doing
Mhm.
the same sort of thing, Julian, like, oh, well, this is one of those samples where we all definitely agreed that this was a great level of absorption or whatever. I don't know, just each time though I was having to prescribe a number or say, yes, it was that or not that, it just felt like I wasn't confident in it, or confident's not the right word, but I
Yeah.
just didn't
Well, I must not have
I didn't
liked it
like
either because
it.
it looks like I never rated it. Nope, there's one. I rated it one time. That's
Mhm.
So look, there's disagreements about
So I think you
everything
had,
on here.
and we all had different standards too. I think to count something as absorbed, maybe my bar was lower, like some of the Saltburn. I think all of the Saltburn, like a lot of the conversation, I put that as absorbed. Maybe Russ, you were holding out for like some of the deeply locked in stuff, but yeah.
So, Mel, when you said just a second ago that there's a lot of disagreements, were you talking about in this column, or were you talking about sort of overall? So, so I would say this is not an
Everywhere.
unusual
The
number
whole
of
thing.
disagreements in a rectification spreadsheet. May, maybe it's slightly more. I'm
Okay.
guessing that if you took out this column, it would probably be about the same number of disagreements as I'm accustomed to seeing.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. I mean, yeah, we can go through one by one, but I just felt like it was very hard to categorize these things, like to assign, uh, yes, there was absorption or not, or like on most things, I was like, this just feels like putting a
Well,
square into a round
it seems
hole.
to me like absorption is in a category of its own in the terms of the number of disagreements.
Yeah. I think for sensory awareness, I might have forgot about all the subcategories, bodily and weight.
Right. That's what I'm guessing is going to be
Yeah.
the case for some number of the others. So it seems to me that we have sort of two choices. We can try to figure out what to do about absorption. There's maybe three choices. We can encounter them as we go. So we'll talk about it in terms of this sample, and then we'll talk about it in terms of this sample, and maybe we'll figure it out as we go. Or we could wait until the end and do them all at the end, or we could try to figure it out at the beginning. And I guess what I think is that we ought to do it as we go. Excuse me, and maybe it'll come clear,
Yeah.
or maybe we'll just throw up our hands and then.
Mhm.
Yep.
But I think that is the virtue as well as the difficulty of the rectification meeting,
Mhm.
because we agreed at some point that there was something here that we were interested in, but then when it came actually to applying the rubber to the road,
Mm.
then we had trouble. We had trouble with that, or at least I had trouble with it. You all had
Mm.
more agreement than I, but even you didn't agree. So, shall we look at absorption, which is the only disagreement in beep number 2.1?
Yeah. Okay. So my bar was pretty much everything above a nothing I put as a 0.5. Or everything. Yeah. So the 0 I reserved for very dormant or nothingy things, and a 0.5 for something present. But I agree that it's not especially, maybe not especially focused.
To me, there's nothing that is in the remotely high intensity level, high concentration, high absorption level, which is the terms
Okay.
that we were trying to apply to this. I'm not saying that I'm right about that. I'm just saying I can't see
So
it.
for me, 0.5 wasn't that it's a maybe for high intensity, but that
And what
it's
part what part of this even would be maybe?
in the middle. I'm saying there is no maybe. I'm saying 0.5 for me, I just put like as an in between. But yeah, if that's a misuse of the scale, then we, c- I'm fine for a 0.
Well, I I think I was applying not figurizing for those sorts of examples. So not figurizing was when I was interpreting that as when I've got the blinkers on and I'm not getting, there's no specifics, and I'm also sort of like this with the thing. So that's not nothing when there's that category present. There's an element of some sort of locked in
Yeah.
because I'm on the thing, but that's not absorbed
I'm happy
from
to just
where
take away
I'm
my 0.5
standing.
here.
Okay. So then the next place we have issues is this one here, which is 2.5.
I have no
Can't
idea
be.
why I've got. Is that the right one?
Really? There's nothing.
2.5.
Yeah. Oh, that's ridiculous. That's a 0.
Yeah, no. I don't know why we both made that mistake here.
And then 2 points. Well, maybe I should go and make sure that that I haven't screwed up something in the.
Look at my sheet.
So this is my sheet.
I know in my sheet I put
This is
0 for that.
Julian's sheet. He put 0. So maybe there is something screwed up in the spreadsheet. And Mel put 0, so there is something screwed up in the spreadsheet. I wonder why that is. I did have quite a bit of trouble with this spreadsheet, and I don't know why it was.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't.
Did I break
So let's
it?
see whether we can find
Sorry, it's always
a
mine.
sample that has a distinct pattern to it. Like maybe here. This would be 7.1 is words present in Mel. 7.1 is a half of words present. And 7.1 for Russ is also, so that seems to be lined up, right? And so 7.1, there's the problem. So this should all be 34. So all these numbers are wrong. So the question is, why? How did this happen? So this is 29. This should all be 29, and it's all 30. So we're all off by a row here. So let me see how to rectify that. This is 9. I want it to be 8. That looks like 8. And it still looks like 8. So we're going to do this again.
Do you need to press enter or something like that?
I don't think so.
Something dumb like that?
All right, let's see whether that did it.
And 2.5 is fixed.
So this is now comparing row 7,
yes.
which is correct. But we decided that that should be a nothing. And this is now comparing row 8, and that's correct.
Yeah. I see, yeah, because I see on my sheet I had a 0.5 for there too.
Yeah, I think it's right.
All right. So now this should be a nothing, day 2? I guess we have
Yeah.
to look at that.
It was the same issue where I used 0.5 as
Okay,
as
so we're
things
going to
that
make
were
this a
above
nothing.
nothing, but before full absorption.
And now we're going to go to 2.6. 2.6.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
we found a solution.
2.6.
Huh. I think this is a thing where we originally described as nothing, but I was wondering if we badly described it. And that if it had come on later days.
Yeah, I put this as absorbed. And I was going 1 or 0s on mine, so this is probably, I'd be happy with the 0.5. But this is where I was just getting trickiness of, I find the distinctions really hard to identify. Like, what is to say that that is more absorbed than me looking at
Mm,
pictures of a Steadicam online as
yeah.
previously. It's just that there's somebody else involved, so it seems more like locked in and to the point where like the content is just whatever. So it's not piquing my interest in some crazy way, so we're not counting it as like fully absorbed. Like I just find the whole thing so problematic.
So there's certainly nothing about this that seems like it's a high intensity level, high concentration, high absorption level. I could see that there was some intensity, but even that is hard for me to get my head around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'd
I'm
give
fine with
this
that
up
too.
to the point of 0.
Well, let's see what happens if we do that. Then in the next beep, which is going to be 3.1, we're
Yeah.
going to have the same intensity issue, except now only Julian says it's a half. That might be his half thing. And then we have unsymbolized thinking where Mel and I say yes. And that Julian must have
Yeah.
just missed.
Yeah, I think it is unsymbolized thinking.
So that's a 1. And then,
I think I put it in the wrong column. Yeah, I put it in the one below. So, so you can also take it out
I can take it out
on
here.
the 2.2, yeah. So it was another thing where I put 0.5 because I thought it was midway absorbed. Like, but yeah, it's not that I think it's super highly absorbed. So we can take that out.
Okay.
But I still think there's something to what you're saying, Mel. Like if it doesn't feel right to you to rate different absorption levels and different intensities. Because that's another thing. I feel like intensity might be the wrong word because maybe you being absorbed or locked in like isn't so intense. I feel like normally when I think of absorption, it's active and intense and you're in it. But for you, it seems it can be kind of chill. I don't know.
Mm.
Well, we might get to those here.
Yeah.
These two might be Julian's more sensitive than the others. So let's see about that. This is going to be 3.5. 3.5.
Yeah. Um, it was again me just using that column as a more than nothing kind of thing.
All right, we'll scratch
And
that
you
for the
can
moment.
take it out.
And
Yeah.
we'll go to 4.1.
Yeah, same thing there.
So we're happy to take this one out.
Yeah.
And then we get to 4.3, 4, and 5, where you all agreed that there was something going on in this arena.
Conversation.
Yeah, but now I sort of disagree with myself because I just don't think that that's actually any different experientially to the other things. It just feels harder to accept because
Mm.
it's such an active thing. You're in a conversation with someone else. You simply must be locked in at a more intense rate. But I actually think, to your point, Julian, it remains quite passive and doesn't seem any different to the other examples ahead. It just
When you
feels
say
harder to
not any different, do you
accept,
mean
I think.
that, the same general kind of thing, but of course there's some differences because it's like just a conversation as opposed to this, or do you actually mean like not any different?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I just think so. The thing that I was confident in being able to identify in all these things is the not. So we can all agree on these things.
Mhm.
I'm not particularizing. I'm not editorializing. I'm not distracted by other things. I'm not like this is happening, which we all are agreeing on all that time. I think absorption is such. I can't do the same thing because it just feels like I don't know, it just doesn't feel not accurate, but like gosh, it feels impossible
It
to
seems to
I
me
don't know.
that if we are we are in agreement, it seems that Mel is not doing anything else. Millie's talking, Mel's taking it in, and she's not doing anything else. I think actually what you said a little bit ago is hard to imagine doing something else when you're in a conversation. Almost everybody does something else when they're in a conversation. Well, I shouldn't say almost everybody. A lot of times people do something else. They're thinking about what they're going to say. They're imagining, but Millie is talking about their having dinner at a restaurant and they're imagining the restaurant scene. People are doing all kinds of crap when other people are talking. And I'm not. This is not disparaging by any means. It is a way that people have of engaging in conversation. Your way, which is fairly unusual, of engaging in conversation is to take it in and nothing else. That's the exception more than the rule, I would say. That it's I might have made it seem a little bit more extreme than I actually think it is, but in that I think there are a lot in regular people, non-Mel people. There are a lot of times when people say I was engaged in conversation and that's all. That's fairly common, which is what I take you to be saying here. Now the question is whether there's something that's exceptionally absorbing about that, which I have a hard time seeing that there is.
Yeah, which is what I now sort of think that like the act of that is no different to the act of me being locked into any of the other things. It's just that at that time I'm in a conversation as opposed to being not editorializing about shuffling through my mail. Like in this, I don't actually think it's any more
Mhm.
active, even though that feels sort of like an oxymoron, because you are like by definition a more active participant in the thing that's happening on. You're engaged in a conversation, but like up here, I don't think it's any different.
So in the green meeting, we said carried along by equals absorbed in conversation. And so we could have said Mel was carried along by the conversation, or we could have said Mel was absorbed by the conversation. That's how I understand this green. Does everybody agree with that?
Hmm.
Well,
I feel
now
like
the question,
carried along.
Yeah, but now
so
I'm
that
sort of
if
going
that is
against
the
it.
case, then the question is, does carried along by deserve to be called concentrated high absorption? So maybe what we should do
I
is we
don't think
should,
so now.
because Julian doesn't seem like he's on board here, we should leave this the way it is, and go on and talk about some more, and then we'll either come back and we'll just wholesale change these all to ones, or change them all to blanks, or do whatever it is that we feel like we have to do after we figured it out. Does that seem like a plan? You happy with that, Julian? Oh,
Yeah, I'm still a little mind melded, like, because you're comparing these to like the shuffling the mail and like stuff like that. Like there could be stuff that was really seemed like barely anything. So are you saying that these conversation things are like are kind of barely anything, but still, but it's not fair to call them nothing, but it's hard to pull apart any one thing, or
Yeah, I think so. And I'm well aware I'm like contradicting myself here. This is all live reaction, but that I think that I've found it easier to do the non-figurizing because absorbed, like exactly high intensity level, high concentration, high absorbed.
Mhm.
I actually don't. That's suggesting that it's really active at some point. Or, and I know we agreed on this at the green meeting, but now that I'm putting things into action, I'm finding it hard. Of like, I don't think there actually is a huge distinction between me being carried along by
Mhm.
conversation and me doing something that was a more passive activity. It's still like this degree of nothingness, this autopilot-y, like whatever, making a cup of tea, not thinking about anything, that's just doing the thing. This is the
Mhm.
same thing, but I'm just doing the conversation. There's no more active component. I think it's just been way harder to
Yeah.
grapple with because that seems hard. You simply must be more, must be something more active in the art of the conversation. But now that I'm having to compare them and decide whether one is more absorbed than another and stuff, I'm just actually not sure that it is.
well, what I would say about that, I have two things to say. One is, this is exactly why I think the rectification meeting is important, and the other is, and the this there being, we can change our mind from what seemed like a good idea to before we had to apply it, to what seems like a good idea after we have to apply it. The, that's what the rectification meeting is for. And the other thing that I would say is, I think it's risky to try to compare a sample to a set of other samples. Like, I think we've been saying things like, well, this is different from the sorting the mail deal.
Mhm.
I think it would be better for us to not do that and wait until we get to the sorting of the mail deal and see whether that's different from the ones that we've already talked about,
Okay.
rather than have a generalized deal where Julian's general impression set of samples that he fits into that sample might be different from Mel's set of samples that she would be comparing to, and different from mine.
Okay.
So I would, so that's why I'm saying, well, I'm happy to leave this the way it is for now, because that'll remind us, oh, we got to come back and do something about this. And then when we get to the sorting the mail thing, then we'll maybe then we will be able to figure out what to do about it.
Yeah. Yeah, we can press on. I'm kind of thinking, yeah, now I'm really having doubts about this category too, especially you, Mel, just saying it just doesn't feel comfortable or right. So I'm wondering, should we ditch it altogether? But yeah, we could try to just keep going and see what else comes up as we do more specific, like deal with actual samples.
So
Yeah, I sort of think that not the category to the left of it has become a more helpful evolution of what we have been calling absorption. It's like the category to the left is us working out, well, what does that mean? When she's absorbed, she's not editorializing, she's not singularizing, she's not. I feel like that category has now become a better definition in a way of absorption, because trying to do the inverse of the not figurizing just seems
that's
so
what it seems to
impossible
me.
to apply.
That for the absorption to be a category, it has to be something that goes beyond this. And so far, I'm not convinced that it does, except maybe in the one sample that I rated, which I think is the grandfather sample,
That any
where there did seem to be there to be more absorption. But we can talk about that when we get there.
Yeah.
So 4.4
Yep.
seems like the same thing.
Mhm.
And 4.5 seems like the same thing.
Yeah.
So whatever we decide for these, they're all going to be the same.
Yeah.
And that takes us to 5.1. And 5.1 differs because Julian, he's number 2 here, Julian only gave this a half a 1 in the not
Figurizing. Yeah, it's about the tote bag. I wasn't sure if that was just because you happened to remember and report on it, whereas some other samples you didn't. So if it's just like a difference between reporting, or if it's actually difference in experience, that this was more about the tote bag.
So I'm not understanding that. Say that again.
Well, it seemed like this one, Mel, is more particularizing. It's more about the tote bag. But I wasn't sure if that's a difference in experience or just reporting, because Mel happened to write down that at this time it was a tote bag, but really the experience is pretty similar. You're just kind of taking in whatever's in front of you, and it happens to be a tote bag at the time. So I wasn't sure.
It seems like the same.
Do you think it seems like the same?
I do, but I considered what you're saying, Julian. Like, I remember I thought, oh, wait, is this more particularizing? I think for the same thing, for the same reason that, oh, we have a more specific thing here. But I agree. I think I decided that's more to do with my reporting than whether the experience was more.
So the difference here,
particularized.
it seems, maybe,
But,
tell me whether this is right, is that in the previous beeps, Molly or whoever was doing the conversation, and so Mel was passively or non-particularizedly grasping what Molly was saying. But now in 5.1, Mel is producing the picture and stopping, I guess, pausing to look at it in an admiring kind of a way. So the question is, once the picture has been presented, then is she having a conversation as if she were having a conversation with the picture? So I would be happy to go with 0.5 here. I can see how that is sometimes somewhat different, but depending on what admiring is.
Yeah, what I'm wondering is if with the Millie and the conversation, if it's, partially what Millie is saying, partially just her vibe and her presence, or just not any one thing, just the conversation. And here it's kind of singled in on that tote bag, that being a nice tote bag. So like a little bit more particularized.
What I
I'm
would,
okay
what I
with
would say, I'm
0.5,
happy
I
with
think.
0.5. And what I would say is it doesn't matter much because we're going to end up with, out of 65 samples or whatever, however many samples there are, 62 of them are, a very big number is going to be this non-singularizing, and there's going to be a couple where that would be hard for us to decide. But it isn't going to change the conclusion. The conclusion is there's a shitload of this stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then, about this same sample, we have to determine the high level of absorption.
Yeah, I just hate the whole category
By
now, so
the new definition we came up with, I don't think it's super high absorption. By Mel wanting to ditch the whole category, yeah, maybe.
I think it's a 0. I think the category can remain until we see whether there is something that makes us say, like, nope, this absolutely has to be categorized as a high level absorption. But until I see
Okay.
that, am leaning towards I don't like the category
So
at all.
that's 5.1. 5.2, we have an issue with unsymbolized thinking. I think maybe 5.2.
Yeah, I would say maybe too. I see the case for maybe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I found this yeah, I probably forgot about that category there. Because when I just categorized it in the other ways, it felt like, no, but this is a bit different and it's not being represented properly.
So now to the high level of absorption.
Oh, I was the only one who put high absorbed. That's
You
still a
put
pretty
high absorption,
engrossing,
and Mel and I didn't.
engrossing thing. But yeah, I had a different bar. I just had a different bar. It seems pretty engrossing, but is it totally all-consumingly absorbing? I don't think so. So
What I would say is with anybody other than Mel, if somebody had a visual image of Maddie Healy, or if they were hearing Maddie Healy, or if they were innerly speaking Maddie Healy, or if they had not words present to Maddie Healy, we would not say this was absorbed. We would say this was all inner seeing or inner hearing or inner speaking or words present or whatever. But for Mel, where the bar for absorption, I still can't see it. I can't see it.
I'm fine taking it out.
I'm not
There's something
commenting
to
on
be
that
said for
category
you
anymore.
hating a category so much, But no.
I just think that, yeah, it feels like so much guesswork to assign a level of absorption to these things. And I am more comfortable with the less guesswork
Mm.
of the inverse of the category, which is the non figurizing thing, which I think hints at being quite locked in holistically to the thing. I don't. I think absorption now, the way it currently is referring to intensity level and stuff, which I just don't think there is a big enough distinction and is
Mm.
just so
It
speculative.
is interesting in response to Julian saying, well, he's going to give credit to Mel. Most often in these DES situations, the Mel person is not there, and but it would be
Yeah.
this is good evidence for why if the person that we were dealing with was invested in the situation as Mel seems to be, then it would be a good idea to have Mel present. Most of the time we don't. Most of, but that's the sort of limitation of what we can
That's
do.
quite interesting.
So we're gonna leave this as it is until we either exhaust ourselves or
About that, yeah, I wonder if I'm being too influenced by you, Mel, like just because it's your experience, to trust that. But
Mm.
I feel like I'd be more wary of that if you were repeating conventional wisdom or like the obvious thing. But to me, the obvious thing seems to be to say, oh yeah, this conversation was more absorbed. And to me, you're saying the less obvious thing, the less kind of presuppositional thing. So it's like it's making me really consider it.
well, shall we skip these, which seems to be probably in the category, or do we want to look at them and get down to this one where at least Mel said,
Yeah, let's skip my point fives.
skip up to 6.2. We can always come back to them.
But
So
I think it's the same. Yeah.
I will mark these as skipped for now. The yellow just means we didn't do those. If we need to, we can come back and look at them.
Mhm.
And then we'll look at 6.2.
All right.
Yeah, my interpretation's changed where I just consider this no different now.
It still seems that way to me.
Yeah.
You want to say anything about that, Julian?
Um, I feel like there are kind of two scales. There's the scale where we just ditch the whole thing, and there's the scale where like we have just different bars for what counts as absorbed.
Mm.
Um, so by the different bars thing, yeah, I don't think it's especially intensely absorbed. And by the ditching the whole thing, yeah, I mean, yeah, I might lean towards that direction more.
So the different bars things is an important fundamental, I guess you might say, epistemological consideration, because if it comes down to different bars, then I think DES isn't interested in that because there's no way there is no possible way that I can think of to anchor the bars.
Mm.
in what way is Mel's level of absorption different from my level of absorption? And if I give a 3 to Mel, is that the same as a 3 to me or whatever? I just I don't see how that can be. And that's different from something like, is inner speaking present? I don't think that's much a matter of a bar. That's the matter of, there are words strung along. Maybe there's some definitions involved and there's some difficulties involved. I accept that. But for the most part, the presence or absence of inner speaking is not a matter of bars. Bars at the edges, where here bars seem sort of at the center. And I just can't see how a science can be worthwhile in the long run if it fundamentally depends on the bars. If bars are error, fine, we can deal with that. But if bars are the whole deal.
So if we're saying this category is too much and where you set the bar and none of us really know where the bar is,
Or even if there is or even if there is a bar, even
Yeah.
if there is a category.
yeah,
And the reason I guess I'm sensitive to that is I think most of psychology is about that. You know, we're dealing with ego strength, whatever the fuck that is, and or you know, take a dart and throw it into most psychology papers, and they're about some construct that people think they know what they're talking about, but I just don't trust it. And I don't think a science of psychology that rests on it can work.
yeah.
All right, so we're going to skip this one.
The Instagram. I think that was another one where I was a bit more than nothing.
All right.
But I think there is something about, well, Mel, you were saying us assuming that conversations are more absorbing and that, I don't know, the mail or Instagram is less absorbing. That's another one where I wondered, did we just kind of presume it was less absorbing because it was Instagram? So, but yeah, we can. Yeah.
Well, we've got some places down here where you all originally agreed. Here, I'm guessing this is going to be a place where Julian forgot. This is 6.5. Sensory awareness bodily.
Yeah, the subcategory.
Yeah.
And then 6.7, this is a place where Julian says maybe unsymbolized thinking. That's 7.1.
Because we said maybe it was just the concept and that explaining it would be those exact words, but it might have just been the idea.
I can buy that.
Yeah, I think I agree. Yeah.
And then words present. Give this a 0.52. Mel, you happy with that?
Yep.
And here again, I would say, you know, we could spend sort of a lot of time debating this, but it isn't going to matter. There wasn't much unsymbolized thinking, and if we call this unsymbolized thinking, there still isn't going to be very much unsymbolized thinking. Which takes us to 7.3. Which I say there's sensory awareness, but nobody else does.
Yeah, I just forgot.
I think I just forgot that because I think in the subcategories I put it. Oh no, I haven't. Why?
So you all put this into the
that's wrong. There is
non-particularizing
sensory
category.
awareness.
we were doing 7.3 now, right?
7.3. Yes.
Okay. On the spreadsheet, 7.3 is different. On my spreadsheet, it says Mel is texting the words of skillfully. Oh, I think this,
Yeah, same.
yeah, the spreadsheet is wrong.
Oh, is this
Same.
where, so now we got the same kind of a problem as we had before?
No, it's different. It's the actual description to the very left of the spreadsheet is the wrong sample.
No.
Yeah, the very, very left.
Yeah, 7.2 and 7.3 are the same
Yeah.
description.
7.3 is the wrong description.
How did we not notice when we
Well,
were doing it,
sometimes there
Julian,
just
that we
is the same description
did
twice
the
because
same
there's
sample
a million
twice?
things.
So this,
Yeah,
so
true.
this should be,
Okay, so what? So 7.2.
Yeah, sensory awareness bodily.
So that Julian and I haven't done
I'll agree
properly.
to that.
so when I did this, I never looked at these descriptions. I looked at this document that we're,
Yeah.
the Word document.
Yeah.
So we're in agreement that this is sensory awareness,
Yeah.
and it's not figurizing,
Yep.
and it is bodily,
Yes.
and it is weight and pressure.
I guess so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Then we are on to 7.4, which is you all agreeing on our problematic category.
Mhm. Doesn't seem so different from the other samples we talked about. Pretty much the same thing.
Okay.
All of my answers in this category are 0 now, unless I say
Then-
otherwise.
This looks like sensory awareness bodily, and
That
Julian
just I
forgot.
forgot to do it. Yeah.
this is weight.
Forgot my
Julian forgot.
subcategory.
And then we get to 8.2 and 3.
Sulfur.
So are you still in the 0 category, Mel? And now that we're in the Saltburn category,
Yeah.
Julian, do you want to make an argument for why this is absorbed?
No, I'm still just as much debating the whole category. So, still in that camp.
So we can deal with that for these 3. These are the Saltburn categories.
Yeah.
And then we get to,
Mm-hmm.
and doubling back to what you had said earlier, Mel, about there being a lot of these numbers on this screen. Often there are mistakes, like the mistakes that we're discovering here are that's just the way they always are. There a lot of times when people just forget to rate things because we're putting them into 2 categories or something.
Mm.
And those are easy, and then we've got the ones that are difficult.
Yeah.
All right. So this is sample number 8.5. So what did we disagree about? Whether there are feelings present. Some of us said yes, and some of us said maybe.
Yeah, I thought maybe frustration or the heart racing.
I'm okay with 0.5. I don't,
My logic there
I'm the one,
was,
so I'm okay with 0.5.
this seemed like a sensory deal to me. In which case, it probably should have been sensory awareness. Should have been a sensory awareness 0.5, which is what I did. Okay.
Well, you've got that as well.
Mm.
But I think that I was doing this with
So
the
are
frustration.
you happy
though.
with a 0.5 here too, Mel?
Yep.
And then we got the absorption. Does this tell us anything about absorption? Probably not.
I don't think it adds anything new to that discussion.
And this is sensory awareness
No.
bodily. If we agree that this is sensory awareness,
No.
it was sensory awareness
And then what
bodily.
if you
All
got
right.
sensory
Yeah.
awareness? Yeah, that's fine.
Which takes us to the same things here. We didn't rate bodily or weight. And then Julian says maybe unsymbolized thinking for 9.2.
Active. Yeah, but by your definition of unsymbolized thinking, this is too diffuse. Because there's no first sentence or thought or whatever. So pondering, yeah, I wondered if a pondering was halfway to like a clear thought, or if it was.
So the logic to that, from my point of view, is, excuse me, if you allow this kind of thing to be unsymbolized thinking,
Mhm.
then everybody in the world will say everything is unsymbolized thinking. If I'm, if anything that interests me, well, I'm sort of thinking about that, and then that becomes unsymbolized thinking.
Mhm.
What's interesting about unsymbolized thinking, I think, is if it's a totally specific thing.
Mhm.
I'm wondering how many nuts there are in a bag of peanuts. That's a totally specific thing, but I don't have any words involved or pictures involved or whatever.
Mhm.
Then that's when unsymbolized thinking gets to be interesting. So I would say, protective of that definition of unsymbolized thinking.
Okay. I'm fine not tainting your category.
I appreciate that. I've had many arguments about that over the years.
Mhm.
And this is some more of this. Anything more to be said from this one about?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. Then this one
No.
is 9.3. Some of us said sensory awareness, but Mel didn't. But pretty clearly it was. Well, maybe not so clearly. Sensory awareness?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yep.
And then I guess I said maybe sensory awareness bodily, which was this here. Maybe sensory awareness bodily.
Seems like quite a maybe. But I'm fine.
Yeah, I think it's too maybe.
I don't have a strong feeling about it at all. So that would be this. Would be a 0.
Mhm.
Not that? Oh, that was
No,
absorption.
not that.
But yeah, that counts.
That was absorption.
So where?
It doesn't matter anyway. Get rid of that.
This one here?
That one. That bodily.
And then that would make it a 1 for essay other than bodily.
And then we get to 9.4.
Scratching.
Scratching. So this is pretty clearly going to be whatever it is. Sensory awareness. Bodily.
Mm.
And Julian and I both forgot it. And anything more to be said about the absorption category?
I don't think so.
All right. Then
We don't have a seeing a number category. Just kidding. I don't think it's so useful.
so this should be this is 9.5. Pretty clearly sensory awareness bodily. So this should have been 1 and 1.
Yeah.
Then for
And we skipped and we should go back to 8.6 because 8.6 is the only one where we originally agreed.
Okay, yeah. Very locked into Saltburn.
Okay. It's just fraught with such danger. I agree that reads like is high level absorbed, but is that more absorbed than the beeps when I've been in conversation with Millie? And the beep goes off and I can't tell you what we were talking about, but I was just carried along by the conversation.
Well, that's an interesting comparison, but let's compare it to this one, which is apples to apples. That one's a little bit apples to oranges. So is 8.6 more carried along than 8.4? And the way it reads to me, it reads that it is, but if it's the only one, it's not very interesting.
I also have hesitation about whether it's content reliant, in terms of like, yes, it reads like it is, but is it because it's at a moment in the movie where it's like, so?
It's also interesting that
I don't know. I don't
it's
like
one where you couldn't originally remember and that was hard to report on. And if we base the whole category on one beep, that was hard for you to report on.
But that's also the same with the previous ones. I
This
couldn't tell
one
you anything about what was happening in the
originally
movie
wanted
in the
to
previous
skip the
samples
sample,
here.
I think, or like just couldn't say anything at all. It's interesting that that's the one
Yeah.
we agreed on.
Yeah.
What I think is remarkable about Mel's experience, and by remarkable, I'm not trying to put a value judgment on it, but something that should be remarked upon, is that most of the time she's not adding anything. So the non-figurizing category is a remarkable category. Mel is a non-figurizing person, it looks like from the samples.
Yeah.
And anything that we might say beyond that, it seems to me, is going to detract from that, because then people can argue about, well, is this absorbed? Is that not absorbed? This absorption category, it's going to distract them from the fact that most. Mel's not doing stuff. So my vote at the moment is to scrap the whole column K.
If I voted now, I would also vote for that.
Have we missed the grandfather sample?
I think it's coming up on maybe day 9.
So I didn't even give that credit.
No.
Because this is the only one apparently where I
It's
gave it
later.
one to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
11.5.
So non-figurizing, we have a disagreement in 9.5.
Who said this is or Mel put non-figurizing?
Mel says non-figurizing. So
Well,
I debated this with Mel at the time,
get
I'm
rid of it.
guessing. I tried to figure out. So sensory awareness, if you think of the tingling sensation as mostly an exterior thing, it's coming from my feet, but it is as if it's neurological, separate from my central nervous system for the most part. Then this seems to me it should be non-figurized.
Mm.
I mean,
Like
I could see that it's non-figurized. To me, it just seems like a different category because, I don't know, I just put non-figurized for the, like if it was sensory
Yeah.
awareness, that kind of superseded because it is a detailed kind of, you're focused on that, on the feet and the tinglingness. And that is, less holistic or diffuse or whatever than, you're watching a movie and you're carried along and you can't even say what the scene was.
How about a 0.5?
Yeah.
And that will
Yeah, I see both
alert
sides.
us that there's something that's sort of interesting here about whether this is non-figurizing.
Okay, but then would you think 0.5 to every sensory awareness, or does this seem like, is there something different about this one?
So it looks like in the past we have not called sensory awareness non-figurized.
Mm.
So from that logic, we shouldn't call this one non-figurized either. All right.
I'm okay with that.
And then in 10.2, I only gave it a half of.
Seems pretty non-particularized.
Seems pretty non-particularized to me. I don't know why I lost my nerve about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to 11.1, and the question looks like it's going to be whether this is feelings or sensory awareness. 11.1.
I think I mislabeled it. I think it's sensory awareness.
Looks like sensory awareness to me. So this should be a blank. This should be a 1.
Put it.
And this
It's
should
got
be
me
a 1.
thinking. Would you ever call pain a feeling, an emotion?
Only if it's part of a feeling.
Okay. But you don't think there's something about pain that's intrinsically a feeling?
I don't think so. And this is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a dull throbbing. Dull internal throbbing might be a portion of I feel irritated or I feel overwhelmed or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
And that goes along. So there may very well be some emotional process that leads to a sensory awareness, but it doesn't. The question is whether it's apprehended as a feeling or apprehended as a sensation.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, that's a really interesting distinction, because there are some people whose bodily sensations are exactly the same thing that everybody else would say this is a feeling, but they say it doesn't feel like a feeling to me. It just feels like this is a body and a bodily sensation. And for them, it seems like they just don't have the way of organizing their sensory bits in the same way that other people do. Other people would say, well, this is a feeling, and they say this is a collection of sensation. But that I don't think is happening here.
Yeah.
So 11.1, this is going to be a bodily sensation. And I also said there was a sensation other than bodily. I don't know why I said that. So I'm happy to make this a blank.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mel in this one did not see it as non-particularized. 11.2. One.
Sure. Yep.
Do we want to talk about these?
Mm,
Oh, this
the
is the grandpa. This is the
one.
grandpa. We should look at that one. 11.5.
One is the grandpa one.
So what I would say about this is, I don't know why I didn't mark this a 1 at the outset, but
Mm-hmm.
but whether we should mark it a 1 now is another story altogether.
So I still think that that is more interesting to be like, well, there's no particularizing, no editorializing, blah, 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 blah about that, rather than assigning it on a slippery
Mm-hmm.
scale of, and also she was highly absorbed. I think that by giving it a 1 in the other category, you get as much tangible definition as you can out of it. And then I think everything in that category is some sliding scale of how hyper focused I am on the thing, but ultimately the thing that's interesting is that it's holistic and nothing else is distracting me from holistically taking that in.
Why do I have to be the one?
But fight me, Julian.
So, let me see whether I can make this work. This might be more complicated than it's worth.
Originally, I didn't even put or catch that it was so deeply absorbed. So Russ added a lot of that in. Not trying to
So
blame you.
it seems to me that maybe what we're saying is if Mel's experience is that she could be hearing the air conditioner but not really, and she could be taking in the temperature but not really, and she could be taking in the the pressure on her left glute or whatever, and but she is paying attention to her grandpa, and she could be paying attention to the pressure on her toe and whatever. Or her experience is something like that. And in some other situations, it might be sort of like this. And the question is whether we're trying to say that this is different from that.
Or it could be that there are
Yeah.
no of these big spikes. That it's not, that a spike implies a kind of intensity that isn't there, or that it feels very active or very tense.
So it stops there. Like I'm watching Saltburn. I'm being carried along by the movie. It's much more Saltburny than it is pressure on the bottom of my foot. But if I got an itch in my foot, I would feel it. Here, even though I might even not even get to the itch of the foot, it would have to be of higher intensity for me to get to it. And the question is, for me, whether this is enough of a deal that we should try to make a deal of it. And most of the time, what we're saying is that these things are pretty inconsequential for Mel. They don't. So I would be happy to trash. I'm sorry, I got distracted by what's happening on my computer screen here. Because when I move these things, suddenly I get two of these things, but that's because I'm sharing the screen on my other monitor. Confused me there for a minute because I've had trouble with this software on one of my other computers, and it looked sort of similar to that, but it's a different story. So about this, are we going to just scrap this category? The high intensity
I
level
think if the
category.
granddad didn't convince us, I don't think anything will. So
I just don't think it's the most interesting part that we actually care about. Do you know what I mean? I think we all agree that, okay, it seems like I am more absorbed there, but high level, what's the story that we're trying to tell here? It's actually that nothing else distracts me from whatever, to your point, Russ, with the little diagrams. The interesting part of the experience is that there's no editorializing, no particularizing, blah, blah, blah. I think that is more interesting than trying to define some level of absorption in terms of what's unique to my
So I
experience.
agree with that. Another possibility, I'm not saying it's better than, and maybe we can figure it out as I talk here. We could say we started out with a category of high intensity, high absorption, because it seemed like it was going to apply in a couple of samples, sort of like the grandfather sample and the other one where the Saltburn. But then we lost our nerve about that because it seemed like it didn't matter.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean that there isn't something modestly interesting there, and that doesn't detract from, or maybe it even adds to the non-figurizing deal. In which case, it would
for
make
just
sense.
unresolved column, just
Yeah,
yeah.
it would make sense to call this a 1 and the other one a 1 and make all the rest of them zeros.
I was thinking just leave the column as messy whatever, just in case we want to go back and see where the disagreements were.
Except I should make this one. If we're going to do that, let's make this one a 1 because I don't know why I didn't make this a 1.
Okay, yeah.
This is the grandpa.
But then I think all my other
So you
answers are
would like to
basically zero now, though.
change all of your answers. I think we can do that, actually.
But would it really make sense to you to say the grandpa one was so different from all the others? Like, do you think it, compared to talking to Millie, do you think it was so much more absorbing?
Yeah, no, I don't. I think they're all. The thing that makes me happiest here is if my answer is zero for all of them. I just don't. High intensity level, high concentration. It just feels like a sliding scale
So I'm
that's
happy with
not.
that as a conclusion as well.
But is it that you think it's a sliding scale that it's hard to even judge or tell where it is? Or do you think it's not even a scale, just so like just too similar and the only really
Yeah,
thing distinguishing is what
yeah,
it's happening, but the experiences can be similar.
yeah. I think I sort of think that as well, Julian. That experientially, does it feel that different? I don't think it does. In terms of I'm locked in with into a conversation with Millie, I'm carried along by, versus I'm locked in listening to this thing of Grandpa. And yeah, I don't. I think that's what it is that I'm struggling with. That the distinction is not
Mhm.
a distinction to be made for
So it could
me.
be that where this comes from is in the reporting.
But
That at the moment of the beep, I'm locked in, and that's pretty much the same all the way around. But when we get to the beep about my grandpa, and I got to tell
mm,
Julian and Russ about this beep, I it is important to me to convey how interesting that was to me. Whereas when about Saltburn or whatever,
mm,
I was just I was locked in and it wasn't particularly interesting. And the conversation with Millie, we were talking about whatever we were talking
mm,
about, the price of eggs or whatever. And when I
mm,
told Julian and Russ about that, I didn't
mm,
have to make a big deal about that.
mm. Yeah, I think that feels really fair. It just feels like that's my constant baseline of like locked in and absorbed
Mhm.
to the thing. But exactly, it's like, oh, but this thing about Grandpa was so interesting. Or if there was you know, exactly a particular thing about chatting with Millie that was so interesting, then I probably would have told you. Or what, like, it feels too content reliant from my perspective, as opposed to does the experience or the level of absorption or the lack of distraction or the non editorializing,
Hmm.
is that the same for everyone? I sort of think it is.
Mhm.
What about that? About this category?
But I'm
This
full of
category is this
contradictions today,
category
so
is,
I'm
I
also
think,
aware
turning
of
out
that.
not to be easy. Moving on to number 12.1, it looks like this was sensory awareness, bodily, and weight, and Julian didn't
Yeah,
record it.
sorry.
And the
Yep.
same thing. Well,
Or
I
this
guess we
was
got
the
luck. We got.
crinkly wrapper of the Easter egg.
Uh,
You like hearing it?
what number are we at? 12.2,
12.3.
12.3.
12.3. Crinkly crunchy. Oh, yeah, that's definitely
And
You were
sensory
other than
awareness.
distracted.
bodily.
I don't know how I missed that.
So this is a 1, and this is a 1. And then we get to 12.4. So this is sensory awareness. This is taking it in.
Yeah, I wonder if I put it was less particularized just because you could report what she was saying. But I do wonder if that's actually an experiential difference or just a difference in reporting.
Or it came from the sensory awareness because we haven't been given not particularized when there was sensory awareness. So are we in agreement? What number are we looking at here? We're in agreement.
Yeah, 12.4, that one.
So I think where the hassle came from is what to do about the sensory awareness aspect. Some of us.
Really, for
said
me, it
there
was
was
more about the
particularization.
quote, the tickets on the website quote. Felt a little more singling something out than some other samples. But yeah, it might not be.
So Mel, would you be happy with a 0.5? Because I don't think it much matters.
Yep.
And then we're not worried about absorption. It is sensory awareness bodily, temperature. And it is sensory awareness other than the bodily surface. Maybe not. Maybe just bodily. Sensory awareness bodily.
Yeah, I don't think it is.
So I put that there by mistake, apparently. Which brings us to number, whatever this is, 12.5.
12.5.
Oh, the maybe relaxation.
I put a 1. I'm okay with a 0.5 there.
And sensory
Yep,
awareness.
I think that is 0.5.
Face smushed.
It's on the pillow.
Sense.
Mushy.
Oh yeah, yes. Face smushed.
And
very sensory.
non-particularizing.
Well, again, I think this has come down to the sensory awareness
doing
thing,
this as
which
0.
we're doing as 0 these days, really.
And then it is sensory awareness
Yep,
bodily,
okay with that.
and it is sensory awareness weight and pressure. And
So there's something interesting there that really, I'd like to look back at this at the end, but the only times, like, okay, what are the commonalities when we're not figurizing isn't categorized? It seems like only when sensory awareness is reported
Maybe your
is when we
unsymbolized thinking in a few
stray from that
cases.
category. Like that's just, I just want to look at those commonalities later and just see, okay, what are the times when that isn't there, when we all agree that that category isn't
so I put that
one.
as a note
What are the
on
commonalities?
this spreadsheet so that it'll end up in the spreadsheet. Is that going to trigger your recollection so that we can get back to that and not forget it? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is our category that we're throwing out. Maybe we should just highlight this whole category so we don't have to worry about it anymore. So we get to 12.6. Some of us thought sensory awareness and some not. Cool breeze on my legs.
I'm really trying to run
Gotta
away
be
from this
sensory
sun.
awareness.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know why. Maybe the slightly took me out, and I wondered. I'm fine with the one.
Or my thumbs. You didn't get past your thumbs. Question is whether there was sensory aspect of the thumbs. Probably not.
Love the breeze. Okay, I'm fine with
I didn't
the
love
one.
the thumbs, but I loved the cool breeze, I think.
And then it would have been bodily.
Other than bodily. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Tactile.
I think I sometimes get confused about what bodily and tactile means, and for some people that's a big difference, but not for Mel. So.
What would the difference be? Something internal in your body versus something you're touching?
Yeah.
Or,
Yes. Exactly.
but isn't
Tactile is the interface between your body and the
Gotcha.
external world somehow.
okay. But it's not still something you feel on your skin. Like some people experience it as different.
Well, in the tactile world, some people experience it as being a fingertip sensation, and other people experience it as being an object sensation.
Hmm.
So I'm rubbing my hands against sandpaper, and some people experience that as being the sandpaper is rough, and other people experience that as being my fingers are irritated or whatever.
Interesting.
And that's in the tactile range and not the bodily range for me.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting down the home stretch here. 13.1.
We disagreed on this.
Again, this is because it's sensory awareness.
Okay.
And so we've been not
I'm buying that.
putting a 1 in this category for the most
Julian's
part when we
mistake.
think sensory awareness is
Mhm.
present.
Then Julian did not say sensory awareness in 13.2.
Oh, I missed the needing to pee, I think.
It's on the wrong page, probably. So this is sensory awareness, and it is bodily. And then we get to weight pressure.
Dull bloated.
Which- Yeah.
Yeah, it depends what you want to do with that.
I guess. Seems like pressure. I don't know.
I don't know. It depends on the sensation. I'll defer to Mel here, and she can.
Yeah, I considered this and then was like, I don't care. Why don't we 0.5?
And what I would say about the process is that every category that we ever make breaks down somewhere, and that is not an argument against making categories.
Yep.
It is an argument against over realizing categories or over I don't even know what the word is, making categories more abrupt than they are. All categories have soft edges to them. And then words present, are we in the same sample? 13.2, words present. We had to gave it words present as a 0.5 in the green meeting.
I'm fine with 0.5 on it.
What's my appointment?
But does that mean we would also 0.5 unsymbolized thinking?
Sure. Yeah.
We gave it a 1.
I think it's already 1, is it? Oh, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
13.2.
Yeah, is that this category? Is that what we're on?
That specific phrase. No.
So this is another good example of what I was just saying. It's possible that this was word present, and it depends on how entirely. And I think I'm happy to have it say this is uncivilized thinking, but maybe it could be words present.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So one left,
I agree with that.
which is whether non-figurizing should be a 1 or a half for number 13.6.
Again, I think it's just because you reported on the exact words, and it is those words. But I'm not sure if it's actually so different or just seems like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really editorialized on it, is there? It's the singled out to feel better, but am I singling out particulars about that? Yeah, I think it's the reporting there
Happy
that's
with that,
confusing.
Julian?
Sure.
I think it's a one.
Let's do it.
So along the way, Mel said sensory awareness is the only time. The only time we didn't do this was when we rated sensory awareness. But I'm guessing.
Yeah, I'm curious about what
So
are the
far, it's all
commonalities
that way.
with the zeros in that category.
And here's an exception to that rule. If there were feelings,
Feelings, interesting.
and unsymbolized thinking, another unsymbolized happen unsymbolized thinking, and another unsymbolized thinking. So mostly yes, I think is the answer to that. But so the question, so if the question is well, when is it, and under what circumstances does Mel depart from just having things roll in, and we said sensory awareness is the predominant one. But that sensory awareness is the least. This goes. Is sensory awareness really a figurizing? I think you could argue that either way.
Yeah.
Particularly for let's say you see my pen, and you're struck by the red of it, and at the moment of the pen, I'm noticing the particular shade of the red of the pen. That's what my experience is. Would we call that particularized? Maybe not. And, what would the alternative be? The alternative would be is Mel's just listening to Russ speak, but that's not really quite true. She's hearing a little bit. So I think it's so. I guess the contrast that I would make would be if I held up my pen and Mel sees red, notices the red of it. By contrast to, I hold up my pen and Mel thinks, what the fuck is Russ holding up his pen for? There's a lot more particularization in that second one than there is in the first one.
Yeah. Yeah. That's still not much. Well, and then I think beyond that too, I think it's really interesting the times when, like, okay, not figurizing, and then there's some unsymbolized thinking. I think that is super interesting to me in terms of like, okay, the woman that's half dead inside is capable of some thought, and when it happens, it's unsymbolized. Like, that's really interesting. As opposed to it being inner speaking or inner seeing or whatever. When we divert from non-figurizing, it seems to be unsymbolized.
Half dead's a little harsh. I like the Buddhist clear lake, I think is nice.
Yeah. The Buddhist version is much nicer, isn't it?
So this is the end of the rectification task, and the rectification task is the last step before writing a description of Mel's experience. And now we have the numbers that, to the extent that we want to use them. And I think there were 65-ish. I forget. I counted them one time, but it seems to have disappeared somewhere along the line. I think there were 65 samples, maybe, and 43 out of those 65 not particularized, and most of the rest of those sensory awareness.
That's crazy. And also, can you just scroll and see when feelings are reported if that's also impacted not figurizing?
Yes.
So yes, the feeling, yes.
But there were only
Interesting.
four cases out of 62 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very
Could blow
interesting.
most
God, this will
people's
blow
minds.
Kerry's mind. This is so different to hers.
So, does anybody want to volunteer to write a description, or shall I write the description?
I don't think I should write it given it's me. I think I'm too close to home to be the one
Uh,
to
So,
first
You
write.
can take a stab at it, Russ. I think
okay.
it'd be really hard. I think I would struggle.
I will
So
endeavor
divert
to
to
write
the
a
big
description
boss.
and to do it fairly soon, sometime this week probably. And then I will send it back and forth, and the object is not to accept what I say, but the object is to make sure that it conveys accurately what you think, and that could mean like a minority opinion. If you could, if you're still, for example, Julian, convinced that there was something in this high intensity category, then you can say, and I don't cover it adequately, and however it is that I just determined to write it,
Mm.
then you should be able to say, you guys disagree with me, or one of us, we wrestled this and never resolved it, or whatever. And that is a fair game portion of the description.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting to kind of tell that story of thinking there were differences of absorption, but that was really, I don't know, like fitting the square peg in the round hole, or the opposite, or whatever.
It's sort of like having a scale with no numbers on it.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'll send this video. I don't think I
So
sent the video of our last session, the pre-rectification. So,
that would be an interesting one to have, so let's not lose that.
yeah.
And this one, it occurred to me that I spent a couple of minutes fixing the spreadsheet. If you can excise that from the spreadsheet, that'd be good.
Okay. Not
From the
useful
video. From the video.
to people in the future who need to learn how to do the spreadsheets. But yeah,
I don't think it was
I'll
very
edit that.
informative. If I had been very informative about that, I would say yes. But I don't think I was very informative, and so I think it's totally a waste of time.
I'll cut it down.
So if you all disagree with that, I don't think this is an ego thing for me that I'm trying to not ever having made a mistake or whatever. But it just seems like
Yeah. No, yeah, I'll cut it out. Yeah.
or the alternative is that you can leave it in and fast forward over it, which is what I often do. I don't know whether you got it easy, but so you could put the whole thing in with the clock in, and then that section
Speed up
fast forward so the clock speeds up as well as the
the clock.
that's
Also speeds up.
that's
But then the
I
clock's
very
not
often do that.
aligned. The clock's not aligned with the video time code, so I don't really like that solution.
Okay. Then
Well,
just cut it. Then just cut it out. Whatever.
all right.
The likelihood of anybody getting that far into the weeds is not very good, but
Never know.
Can I just say, sorry, I was just looking at the spreadsheet again. Ignoring the absorption category, the way the spreadsheet is right now feels really reflective of my inner experience. Like I feel really good about what is on the page there. Like the little bits about symbolizing, the feeling, the sensory awareness, the not editorial. This feels like a very accurate reflection of my inner experience, which is just satisfying. Just want to make that clear. If I ignore the absorbed category, that category I don't like.
well, good. And that does remind me.
But so that's cool.
of something that I was going to say a minute ago, when I was saying there can be a minority opinion. When the written description ought to be something where, when we get to the end of it, that each individual says, yeah, I'm willing to go before the Supreme Court and say this is what I thought at the time. That doesn't mean that you had to have been right at the time, but you had to have, this description adequately reflects what I thought at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's a one step removed from Mel, who is in a position to say, and that description characterizes me other than this. Julian, the best Julian and I can do is to say we got 65 samples or whatever they were, and this is what they were. Mel has the option of going beyond that and saying, man, that's the way it seemed to me as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, anything else that we need to talk about? I think Julian has sent a response that I haven't yet looked at on the Carrie front. And,
The website looks good to me. There's the question of the transcripts of the like the debriefings and the green meetings. My final take was that it might take me a while to edit those, and that you're free to put them up before I've taken a look.
yeah, I'm waiting. I think primarily for Carrie about that. I
Yeah.
don't want to take her by surprise of putting this up. I think you and I, or you and Mel and I, or whatever, we can put something up, and if a week from now or a month from now we want to edit the transcript, we can do that.
Then I also have a first draft of the video, or a first video, Carrie's experience. So that should be. I'm interested what you guys think of it.
Should be interesting.
Fun.
Ended up longer than I thought it would be. It's like 30 minutes.
Great. Can't wait. Oh, interesting. And then I would say I think that all of this can be done on email now. Apart from then, I think the final step should be, once we have agreed on a description of me, I think then we should propose another quick meeting with Kerry where we bring the two final
I think that's
summations to
fair.
her.
Sort of
I think that
an
she would be
overall
really
debrief of
interested
the whole
in
deal, and,
that.
Yeah.
A quick little wrap up,
That's
show
true,
her
'cause
the
we never
findings,
presented
any
her
last
final-
questions, and that's it.
You know, we spent all those weeks talking about. But I think you kind of summed it up, like after the sampling, you were like, well, you have quite a lot of, inner scenes. I think you summed it up pretty much what we found.
right. And I did write a description which I think you all might have commented on, that I have sent to Carrie as well, the overall description of her experience. But she has not been in on the Mel conversation, other than what Mel has said or what we have said in passing.
It's interesting to bring it together.
Yep. And I know that, I know that she is really interested in that, because in the same way that I find her experience so interesting because it's so different to mine, she feels the same. So I know that she would find great satisfaction and interest in a quick chat comparing the two findings.
It's not the first thing on my agenda, but I will try to keep it high on the agenda this week.
All right.
No.
I'll stop the recording so everybody keep the window, keep the
that
browser
sounds great.
open a bit.
All righty.